Welcome to ShapeLanguage. This week, Damon and I are joined by Jayson Fitch. He's a fantastic character artist that we're very fortunate to have at Insomniac Games. His background in programming has always made him the go-to guy for all of our tech questions. And, well, this episode does start off on a tragic note. We quickly transitioned to talking about much more positive things, where Jayson shares some of his best tips on achieving work-life balance while continuing to build your portfolio. So without further ado, I hope you enjoy this much improved audio experience due to our new mics. So here we go. So I got a little update for you guys. So Last time we met, we had a fantastic podcast. Went back Thursday night, listened to the whole thing, and it was really, really good.
Cool.
So I was stoked for our conversation today. So I jumped on last night to move the podcast over, and you know where this is going.
Mm-hmm. Oh, no.
I didn't back it up, and the file had been corrupted.
Oh.
And I started recording this new podcast before I told you, because if you guys decide to kill me right now, I just wanted my family to know what happened. So all of the glorious talk about AI on our jobs and mentoring and doing apprenticeships and Jason's full background story has all been lost to the void.
Damn, that's like that lost chapter of the Bible. We'll never get it back.
It's gone. It's just
gone.
So the silver lining is that I've now set it up so that it's immediately backing up to the cloud, and I'm saving this out.
All right.
The third and fourth backup as soon as we're done. But my sincerest apologies to you, Jayson. We had a fantastic podcast recorded.
It's fine. We just had a really nice conversation in Carrie's office.
Yeah.
We did. Yeah, that was probably the fun part.
Yeah.
No, it generally was really good. And the fact that I had already listened to the whole thing in my mind had solidified it as already existing in the world.
Yeah.
You live and you learn.
Yep.
Yeah.
Damn.
I don't think I've ever lost an art asset before. I mean, not more than maybe an hour of work.
Yeah.
Sure.
But
Yeah.
this was probably the most devastating loss that I've experienced.
Yeah, that's
In your whole life.
That's
Ever. Yeah.
I've had a really easy life.
Maybe I'll cut that part out. I sound like a real ass now. But we did leave it at an interesting point, which was we were talking about work-life balance. And I think we were talking about, Jayson, you were biking into work, and then you had carried on the conversation as you were leaving the room, and I'm not sure exactly where things left off, but if you want to pick up wherever that was, if you remember where it was.
It could be anything from you bike to work, I know that, which is awesome, but you also manage to get out of here every day at a reasonable time.
Oh, yeah.
And how does that open you up, and what's that like?
I kind of have to force myself sometimes to just drop everything. So I actually have a calculator set up on it's an Excel spreadsheet. So when I get in, I punch basically a clock and say what time I got in. And then the Excel spreadsheet gives me a bunch of break times. And then that sets up alarms on the computer. So the alarms go off and say, hey, get up, get away from your computer for 15 minutes, right?
I sit right next to you. How did I not know that you already had this set up?
I don't know.
Wow.
Not paying attention.
So
apparently, it seems to be a problem of mine right now.
I don't do the same time every day, so it's based on what time I get in, right? So you may not have noticed, but so I do that, and then really it's mentality of if I push myself an extra hour one day, there's a good chance that extra work isn't going to be of the quality that I want it to be anyway, and I'll end up redoing it the next day. So I kind of just give myself permission to finish it tomorrow or work on it tomorrow, you know? Sometimes that leads to, when I have a really heavy asset or something, it'll be some weekend work to really get it done. But I kind of prefer that to working extra hours every day. you know? Because like we were talking about last time in the podcast that will never be.
I'm sorry.
The idea of like your day-to-day job and like working overtime, sort of crushing that creative aspect. And I think like being able to go home at the same time every day and like leave work, leave work at work really helps with that.
Okay.
So yeah, that like half an hour of biking home, like all of the workday stuff just sort of bleeds off.
Interesting.
I wish I had done that sooner and found like, I definitely recommend to everyone who is currently in the industry, if you're like just sitting at your desk all day and then you go home and you sit some more, to do like some kind of exercise.
Yeah.
Yeah, because like, so every morning I stretch before I get on the bike. So I spend like a half an hour stretching and like stretch my wrists and all that kind of stuff. And my shoulders and all that, which sometimes doesn't help. I've had pretty bad neck pain this last week, but doing that has helped with like carpal tunnel issues and other work-related stress injuries. I've had quite a few work-related stress injuries, and I've had to go to physical therapy and stuff like that, and really like getting out ahead of it and finding something that you like to keep you fit at least a little bit. Like, you know, I think a lot of the folks here like to lift weights or do weight training or play soccer or something like that. I think that just helps. It's the same thing as like, I've seen a lot of folks in game design talking on Twitter about how you need to have hobbies and like a life outside of working on games, or else you're just gonna lose it, you know?
Yeah.
It's the same thing with your health. Like if you don't have something going on, it's just gonna spiral. And like when you're young, it's easy, right? You bounce back. You know, I could work like 12-hour days when I was 20, but now that I'm 26, which is not that big of a difference.
Feels like it is though, right?
Yeah. I can't bounce back anymore. You know, I've had neck pain for a week when normally I would have had neck pain for a day.
Yeah, and you feel it when you, both on the days and just the sort of this afterglow of stretching or of going to the gym, or like I know when I get back from soccer with the guys that you've been running around with a bunch of your best friends in the sun, having a great time, and you feel the glow that day and it impacts your work, but it also long term, you know, is going to, you know, extend your life. It's going to make your life that much better while you're living.
Yeah.
It definitely pays off down the line too.
Yeah. I've noticed a huge turnaround in just my personality as well, where like...
Interesting.
I was just like angry and like, you know, man, I don't want to do this fucking retopo like all the time, you know, and then like after...
To be fair, I never would have classified you as an angry type of person, but maybe you were holding all this on.
Yeah. Or like, you know, when I sit down to lunch, I would just be complaining about stuff and like...
Interesting.
And now that I have like an avenue to channel that into, it kind of goes away.
So you just bike out all the anger.
Yeah.
Just pedaling so hard.
I try to, yeah.
How fast did you notice that difference take place?
It's taken like a month or so before I kind of realized it. But I mean, like the second or third time I biked home, I noticed the difference of like when I got home, it like I was separated from work, you know?
Interesting.
That was a big deal. The other thing is like I had to purposely like not get work email at home and turn off Slack on my phone. And we used to use Trello, so I disabled like Trello notifications because I was getting stuff at like midnight, right? Because like somebody was in like giving me feedback, and I'd be reading the feedback like, oh man, I should have seen that. Oh no, this is such good feedback, and now I want to work on it. Or like, right? And it's like,
you have to separate.
I need to sleep.
Yeah. So true.
I just downloaded the email app that we use here on my phone, and I just immediately turned notifications off. I was like, get that shit away.
Throw it in a folder, put it in a miscellaneous folder, bury it.
Yeah.
Like it's not worth it until you get into some of those higher roles where you're creative director or a lead or something like that. Where
it's time sensitive.
Yeah, exactly.
People are counting on you.
Yeah, like nobody needs you to come in and work on feedback for a character at 2 a.m.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I will say that, like you said, there are different points in your career, and like when you're 20, maybe you like working those 12-hour days, or when you're a student, you like working freaking 16 hours a day.
Sure.
Or when you're a creative director, maybe you're not. Maybe you take more breaks throughout the day, but you kind of have to be on all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, it's all just, you fall into these different patterns and rhythms, and this all just overlaps with something I was listening to over the weekend, which was a podcast with another artist. And I won't mention their name. I think they were a great person. They seem like a rad dude. But they were talking about how they basically just do art all the time. And for them, like, they absolutely love doing that. It's them and their wife. They go home and they do art together, and then they go to work and they just bust out these pieces all day long.
Mm-hmm.
And my immediate reaction was, that feeling of guilt a little bit, where I was just like, oh, like I used to do that and now I don't. Like, am I a failure as an artist? And then I was thinking about the delineation between, like, if you are just constantly honing your craft, you can become better and better at rendering. But some of the most creative people who we look up to, imagine like the directors of the world, or game directors, for instance, are the people who pull in these aspects of their lives from so many different areas. And it's less about just, again, that rendering and the final tight, polished piece that you're making, and more about maybe the vision or leading a team or just different pieces to that.
Yeah, well, I think there's a big difference between art and craft, which is like we are essentially like glorified like construction workers, right?
Yeah.
The
production artists.
Yeah, we're production artists. The concept is done by a different artist. It's our job to take that. We might add a little bit of a spin to it, right? But it's still very much like art direction wants this, and it is our job to execute, right? And you can get really, really good at doing that execution, but if you also want to be good at other aspects like that concept line or understanding what the art director wants and why they want it, that's a totally different mindset from just executing.
Yeah.
Right.
And there's also the aspect of that of like the communication that's involved in figuring all that out is a whole separate aspect that takes its own set of skills, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So like you were saying, like the more side avenues you have in your life, the more skills you're going to gain that enable you to be a better asset to your team.
Right.
In every avenue.
Yeah. Jake Parker has a great video on the creative bank, I believe he calls it, where you're essentially, every time you're working on something, you're making withdrawals from your like creative bank, right? And occasionally you have to make deposits. And so in order to do that, you need to do something that inspires you to make that happen. So he talks about, going for hikes, going into nature is really good for that. It's just, it might be just watching a movie with a style you've never seen before. Like, you can't just be, you can, if you really want to get to the point where you're just really good at that execution, sure, working on your art 24 hours a day, sure. But that creativity, I think, is, you have to refill that bank and do other things.
Yeah, right? And clearly this guy I was listening to, he seemed like a very personable guy, and he's talking about going to lunch with his friends, and there's clearly other parts of his life where he is getting to make deposits into that creative bank. So it just depends on the person and what they want in that creative bank.
Yeah. It makes me wonder too if, like, I listen to a lot of art podcasts, and a lot of artists will say, like, oh yeah, you got to be all about your art all the time, right? Yeah. And I wonder if people just say that sometimes.
Yeah.
Because
sometimes you add up the hours they're talking about, and you're like, well, that's like 40 hours a day, so something doesn't work
here. Exactly. And the other thing I've noticed is a lot of artists that that say stuff like that. And this isn't a bad thing. I think it's great if you can find this and both parties are happy with it. But a lot of artists that are all about art all the time end up having a spouse or partner who picks up a lot of slack.
Interesting.
From what I can tell. Like, a lot of those really top tier artists are married and have kids, right?
Yeah.
But they're at work all the time, you
Yeah.
know, and I'm sure that arrangement works great for them. But, you know, that's not something I'm looking for personally.
Sure.
You know, is to have somebody who's just at home cooking and cleaning all the time. Like,
Yeah.
I don't want that.
That was my whole life plan, Jason. You're making me question everything.
Yeah, but it's really easy to become, you know, like amazing at your craft and work 24 hours a day if you have somebody who's like supporting you like that. Sure, yeah. You know, like when you're in college, you know, you have so few actual life responsibilities.
Yeah, no dependents, no kids.
Yeah,
to the
oftentimes you have
cafeteria,
a
eat
meal
food.
plan, right?
Yep.
Exactly. Like, you may not even have a job.
Yeah.
You know, sure, you got to get some schoolwork done, but you can kind of, you know, fudge that. And, you know, I don't think I did a single assignment in school that actually was like, oh man, I'm totally going to fail this, right? Like,
Yeah.
and maybe that's just me, but I didn't find any classes actually difficult except for one course of programming where the teaching style just wasn't my thing, where it was just like throwing that knowledge at me and I had to figure out what was important. You
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
But a lot of the courses I took were very step by step, like, here's how you do this, and I'm going to hold your hand, we're going to walk through it, and then I'm going to give you the answers to the test, and then I'm going to give you the test.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah. That makes it
It's
pretty
like-
simple.
Yeah. I was like, great.
Yeah.
This is cool. So I guess I can work on my portfolio at the same time. Thank
Yeah.
you. Not to diminish college education, but
I mean, that's what it's all about. It's just to build the portfolio.
yeah.
Right?
Well, for us, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Once you realize that's what you should be spending your time on,
Yeah.
it's easy to set priorities.
Yeah, and that's a big thing that I think a lot of people kind of forget while they're in that trench of school is like the assignments are great, but they're really just to get your mind running, and then it's up to you to take that to the portfolio level and
Right.
and make it something that is your own, that is different from everybody else. Because when an employer is looking at a portfolio and they see assignments that they've maybe seen in other portfolios,
Yep.
it stands out a lot. And
Yeah.
so
We've all seen that Dishonored sculpt like a million times.
yeah. So it's definitely like doing the portfolio and making it your own is the most important thing. And if you have a situation in which like your classes are coming easy to you, or you know they're not pushing you to your wit's end, then maybe that's where you need to start looking to push it further with your portfolio work.
Right. I guess we should specify that because I didn't go to art school or get a degree in art. This was in the Lost podcast.
As it will forever be known.
Yeah.
Oh, right.
So
Yeah, you remember that?
I had a programming degree with essentially a bunch of general education, so it's very different for me than what you went through.
Sure.
Right.
In that my portfolio building was all outside of school, essentially.
Yeah.
And I think some of the advice that I got early on that I think is pretty well known at this point, as I hope it is that like destroy your student portfolio once you're done with school and then start fresh. Right?
That's a good point.
I think that is really good advice, because the stuff you do in school is literally to teach you the basics and like maybe some intermediary stuff. And then you got to scrap all that stuff and work on some new stuff that integrates everything that you've learned, right?
Yeah.
And have actual finished pieces.
Yeah.
I think like for character art specifically, 1 to 4 finished game characters textured in a game engine, posed if you can pull it off.
Yeah.
You know what I really like, though, is that because you could sort of make the same argument for, say, you in 10 years, right? You would look back on the work that you did early on in your career and say, whoa, I've grown so much, should freaking delete this stuff out, too.
Yeah.
I understand if you are a student, like you've just jumped into becoming a professional, you're evolving by leaps and bounds. You want to get rid of that stuff that's like clearly older. But I also have always seen tremendous value with those professionals who go back and post their student work because it makes them seem so much more human. And as a student, it suddenly made me go, oh, like, I can do this. This person wasn't always a legendary artist. They actually got from step A to Z, and this was the whole arc. So maybe just hide those pieces for a while and be ready to show them again in 20 years. Because I've seen a lot of value with that too.
Definitely save those on the external hard drive.
Yeah, right.
Back them up. That's the theme of the day.
I have like a follow up to that. Like, so you've been in the industry for a while now, right? Like 5+ years, correct?
About 5 years, yeah.
Okay. Have you been able to successfully erase your student portfolio and replace it with a new set of stuff? And how much of that is stuff you've done at work and stuff you've done on your own?
Yeah, so yes, in that once we were allowed to post stuff for Spider-Man, that took over my portfolio. So for now, it's pretty much just that. I have like 1 or 2 pieces that I did after leaving school.
Okay.
So my student portfolio consisted of, it was awful. It consisted of 2 finished characters that were concepts from WildStar that I tried to do in PBR.
It's a smart idea.
It kind of worked, but this was before Substance Painter came out, and I tried to do like a lot of the detail in Substance Designer, and it kind of worked, and it wasn't very good work. And then on top of that was just a handful of like sketch sculpts that I had taken to as far as I could, right? And that was the stuff that I axed pretty early on, and replaced it with a couple of finished characters, and then like 1 or 2 finished sculpts, like sculpts that I was proud of. I still have one in my portfolio right now, the Crow Father from.
That's a great. That is an awesome piece.
Love that piece. The original is still so much better, but like and I still have like I'm still working on that one a little bit here and there.
Oh, cool.
And then I opened it up like maybe a month ago, and I was like, whoa. I need to completely redo this.
Right.
So I was able to do that pretty quick, and I did it at the same time as I was graduating. So I axed my student portfolio maybe a month before graduating because I had this period of time where I wasn't taking any classes, but I hadn't graduated yet.
Okay, so you had a lot of free time at that point.
Yeah, so I was doing an internship and working a part-time job and then working on the portfolio, and that was basically my life for like 3 months.
Right.
It's a good chunk of time.
That sounds like a lot of work, and I think that's a good place where we could double back to, you noted that you had a plethora of stress and work-related injuries. I was wondering if you could like run through those just so people maybe can be aware of what's out there and what to look out for.
Your medical notes, please.
Yeah.
Oh, sure, yeah. So one in particular is back pain, obviously. I think we all kind of deal with that on occasion.
Standing desks help a lot.
Standing desks.
A lot.
Yeah, standing desks, good shoes. And then stretching. So I stretch every morning and every night, and that really helps with that.
Yeah.
Car accident did not help with that.
Oh, yeah, that'll really throw a wrench in things.
Yeah. I didn't really start noticing the stress-related injuries until, like, last year.
Okay.
And it's a lot of just, like, checking your posture during the day, especially if you're not at the standing desk.
We're all straightening up now.
Yeah.
And there's some cool plugins for that too. Like there's the Chrome add-on that just like pings you every 15 minutes.
Yeah.
Just set up straight.
Yep. I need to get that one. I have a bad habit of just turning into a fucking goblin, just like over the top of my
all
seat.
do.
Like,
this line must be perfectly straight.
Yep.
I love like crossing my legs and sitting on one butt cheek, and I just can feel my back just bending sideways.
Yeah.
It's so
I have
bad.
to constantly remind myself not to cross my legs. Like I like to sit like that, and I think that kind of messes you up.
It's so comfortable, but at what cost? you know?
And then, so basically, I had an issue with muscle tightening that because of work-related stress, these muscles were so tight and then just got kind of locked there.
Mm-hmm.
And it was in sort of my legs and lower back sort of combined together to just like lock together. And it was just like constant pain all day. And I went to a doctor and they thought it was so many different things. It was really strange. They couldn't figure it out. I got screened for cancer at one point.
Oh my
until
God.
Eventually one of my doctors was like, you know, I think this might be stress.
Yeah.
That's simple.
Yeah.
Yeah, and sent me to physical therapy and basically gave me muscle relaxers. And after 6 months of PT and following their instructions and doing breathing exercises, I'm mostly back to normal now, but I still have to do all those exercises and breathing exercises and stuff like that.
That's a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you have any advice to avoid that from the start?
Yeah, like I said, like setting up those reminders to yourself to get up and breathe and finding some sort of exercise that where you can or some sort of outlet for that stress, right? Because the stress is going to build up in your body, and there are only a certain number of ways really in which to get rid of that stress. Like we are essentially the same creatures we were millennia ago, but we are no longer running away from leopards and fucking mammoths and shit, right?
Yeah.
Like, we're sitting at a desk having the exact same stress of like, oh god, I could die, which is essentially like way down the list of like, I could fuck this up, get fired, no longer have income and then die, right? But your brain still treats that as the same thing as the leopard chasing you. Yeah. But you're not running to get the stress out, so it's stuck in you.
Right. You need to let it out.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, I don't know, join a band, get some exercise.
Yeah.
Scream into a pillow real loud.
Have it right at your desk there.
That's what the car ride home is for. It's just screaming.
Wait till you see Jayson bike by you, he's just the whole way home.
Well, that's how you feel that separation.
That's how you get to that. It's like, I feel great by the time I get to work. I don't know what it is. Have you found that even in your work time, like you were saying outside of work, that you feel a lot less stress, but do you feel like you're working more efficiently now, or that you're more creative because of any of this, or has it just kind of improved your overall life?
I think the overall life. I haven't noticed a huge difference in my day-to-day work.
Even through the optimism piece, because you mentioned that.
Yeah, that's true.
That element of it.
Yeah, I'm less down on myself throughout the day and like what's going on. It's easier to focus on the task at hand, and I don't know. I the only thing I've really noticed is that I'm getting work done faster. Yeah, and I'm able to do things, and that just might be like the point I'm at in my career, in that I'm able to do things that would have taken me 3 or 4 days in a couple hours, right?
Sure.
But I think that's part of it, and then a lot of getting up and interacting with you guys and seeing what you're doing. And
but I think, all of those pieces are obviously connected. I remember one of my favorite TED Talks I used to listen to when I was a kid was about how happy people just work more efficiently. And they were talking about specifically doctors in that case.
Yeah.
And I'm sure a big piece of it is just that you're becoming a more efficient, practiced artist.
Yeah.
But I think they all play a piece.
Yeah. Well, it's like the 4-day work week thing.
Yeah.
Like actually ends up with people being more productive.
Yeah.
Because everybody's happier.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think that I like
Also,
that.
Colton, sorry, I don't
No,
know.
it's okay, it's okay.
I just really like the idea of like child Colton watching TED Talks instead
It's
of
such
Disney
a-
movies.
It's such a Colton thing to do.
Yes.
Shrek can go
nostalgic-
fuck itself. I'm walking Ted.
No, that's strangely accurate.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, we'll dive into my history someday.
Yeah, but I like the you mentioned like the positivity, because I think that is, I could see that being a huge asset when it comes to being faster, because I've known people who are, let's say, not so positive, and they're doing great work, but they don't see it, and they think it's terrible, and they end up erasing and starting over 10 times, when in reality probably the second or third one was like a winner, and it was if they had just spent the time on that and been, confident and positive in that, they probably could have got somewhere better faster. So I think that's a cool like mentality to have, of like be critical of yourself, but also know that if you give anything the time and confidence that it deserves, you'll get it to a place that is acceptable, if not awesome. You know what I mean?
Helps give you a better perspective sometimes.
Yeah,
And there's nothing wrong with starting over. I mean, throughout the day, I think I like try something and throw it away 3 or 4 times before I end up with the one I want. I think it's a matter of like developing the eye to say, okay, I know the path I'm going down right now isn't going to work. If that works for you, I think that's a good thing. But there's like early on, I think when you're a student, and it's just like you sort of lose your ability to take what you currently have in your hands and take it to completion, because you're just too frustrated with the tool set, or you can't get the image in your mind into this character in front of you, right? That's I think that point at which people are like, fuck, I'm just going to restart.
Yeah. And I think it also helps to take in mind like deadlines as well.
Oh, yeah.
Like I remember when I was in school, we had 10 weeks to do anything, period. Maybe 11 if we had like a makeup week. It was 10 weeks, deadlines, and I was more often than not doing full characters. And like a lot of times like that's, and I'm also balancing 5 other classes. So it's like I had to, if I were to be negative on myself, I probably never would have got anything done. But I decided pretty early on, I was like, if I only have 10 weeks to do this, I can't nitpick myself to no end, because then I'll just end up with a portfolio of completely unfinished work.
Yeah.
And I think one of the stronger things that I had coming out was at least everything in my portfolio was finished. Not necessarily the best, like by any means. It was pretty shoddy a lot of times, but they were all done.
Yeah.
And I think that was a lot to do with me being positive about it and going like, it's not perfect, but at least I'm moving forward constantly instead of going back and whatnot.
Yeah.
But there's also a lot of value in starting over, because I did that a couple times, and it was like you get farther in 5 minutes when you're doing it the second time than you did in an hour the first time, because you've already made all the mistakes.
Yeah, it's constantly balancing when do I pivot and when do I commit.
Right.
Because both of those are so important, and you just have to time them right, and you have to be able to make that call, and it's hard when you're down in the trenches sometimes.
A lot of times, in the words of the great Into the Spider-Verse, it's a leap of faith.
Yeah.
You just gotta go for
It's
it.
a leap of faith, and it's a leap of faith that your friends and your art community can help you make, because that's when those outside perspectives really helps make the call.
Yeah,
like getting a second set of eyes on something and saying, is this the right direction to go in, or should I scrap this and start over? Man, that's when you really rely on your network.
And the positivity thing, I think, like comes into play even more when you're communicating rather than your personal artwork or the task that you have in front of you. Like, it might help you to commit, right, as you were saying. But the more important thing there is that when you're communicating with other people around you, or you're in a leadership role, it changes your mood from, no, we can't do this because I need to protect the people under me, or need to make sure that we're not wasting a ton of time. It moves to, how can we do this? Because your idea sounds cool. How can we do this? How can we make this work? Right? And that's the same answer. It's just framed in that positive light of yes, let's do it, but how do we do it smart?
It's the designer's question of how might we.
Right.
That's a good
I love that reframe.
Yeah.
That's a really good one.
Because I think there's a lot of tendency for people to get protective and defensive and like, we're not gonna, show this particular thing in a scene because it's going to be too hard for everyone involved. We're not doing that. No.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Versus like, let's do it and find a way that no one is having to put too much time into it. And yeah, like you said, reframe is so important. And if you're thinking in that positive mindset as much as you can, I mean, it's impossible to be positive all day, but
Sure.
If you're in that mindset because you're leading a healthy lifestyle, it's a lot easier to stay in it than if you're just stuck in the mire of like you're in pain or, just down on yourself all day.
Yeah. And it's something that you can practice throughout the day too. Mm-hmm. I've always been surprised at how many designers I know from game designers, but also art designers of some type, don't apply those same design type questions to their life, where it's like they'll have these great open-ended like how might we kind of questions when it comes to work stuff, and then it'll come to some other aspect of their life like health or like their relationships, and they have a completely different approach where it's just totally faith-based, or it's like, oh, I was just raised this way, like I'll never question it.
Sure.
And so it's both something that like you can practice those design questions throughout the day, but yeah, they can also just impact a lot of different aspects of your life, and I'm sometimes surprised people don't utilize them more because we find them so helpful at work.
Art and doing this as a job, the art is only one piece, and I think a lot of times people focus so much on that piece that they forget about the other ones. And I think that's partially like the reason we're doing this is just because we want to highlight that there's other stuff, and we all need to focus on being better people, because that makes us better artists and better employees and all around better.
Better employees. That's really what I want to focus on. But it is true. It is all connected.
This swings back to what we were talking about earlier with that guilt you're feeling over not like working on your art all the time.
Yeah.
That just comes back to that like capitalist mentality of like you have to be productive in society to be valued, right?
Well, and seeking validation too. I mean, you can work that into it as well.
Yeah.
But the capitalism is a piece.
I think it's a big part of it. You see people like, I need to work on my craft so that I can get hired and be successful. And like, man, if you just enjoy it as a hobby, that's cool too. Hobbyists out there listening to this podcast, more power to you.
So actually, that brings up a question of like, when you're in school, your goalpost is graduate. When you graduate, your goalpost is get a job. Get a job, goalpost is move up. So that constant act of goalposting sometimes leads to dead ends where you're like, now what?
Yeah.
Have you ever felt that? And like, what did you do at that point? And maybe what are your goalposts right now?
Yeah, absolutely. So after I got promoted from a junior artist to mid-level, so just straight up character artist, after working a year of that, I kind of got this plateau of like, okay, my work is at high quality, I'm delivering it at a good pace. Where do I go from here, right? And my next step was luckily our company is pretty good at communicating these things, in that we have some documentation on what your work path is, right? So as a character artist, you can kind of branch, and it's one path is much harder than the others, but it mostly comes down to time, right? So senior path, you need more experience under your belt, you need more time, and then you need to be communicating with other departments, you need to be mentoring other artists, and your work needs to be essentially an example to the entire team, right? So not only do you need to be a good artist, but you need to be able to communicate very well, not only with other character artists, but with animators, with technical artists, with designers, with programmers, and with leads, obviously.
Yeah.
and you need to be able to show people how you do the work that you do. You need to be able to teach people.
Oh, the age-old show your work. Man.
Right. You can't just be like really friggin' good.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that is another line that you can take, which is the principal artist, which, you know, that's going to be 5 to 7 years of just busting out really high quality work. But in an ideal scenario, the principal artist is making example work for the rest of the team to show this is how you do it, and then also teaching, right?
Yeah.
So there's still a little bit of that communication aspect versus a lead in which your work, the amount of artwork that you're doing is reduced pretty significantly, and you're mostly helping people with their career, making sure that assets are getting done on time, organizing the construction of all of those assets across 2 or 3 months to make sure that nobody's crunching, right? So I looked at those paths and tried to figure out where I want to be, and for now I'm still sort of up in the air, but I at least like talked with my lead and sort of said, hey, where do I go from here? You know, where does my work need to improve? Where do my communication skills need to improve? And so right now the goalposts are senior artist for me.
Okay.
But I'm sort of just kind of feeling it out, you know, because there's sort of this 5 to 7 years in the industry like requirement for senior artist, and I'm just on the cusp of that range. So we'll see where it goes, but I was struggling for a while on that, like, what do I do now question.
And was it just a matter of time before you have started to sort of distill the direction you want to go in, or were there certain questions or events that happened that kind of let you figure it out?
It was mostly a matter of time, I think. You know, I watch what Gavin does and kind of like, okay, I really like being a support role. I like teaching you guys a lot. You know, that's kind of the direction I want to go in, but there's not really a lot of room for that. It would mean that I would probably have to leave Insomniac and go somewhere else, but I really love Insomniac. And, you know, it's the same thing. Like, if I really wanted to, I could probably leave Insomniac right now and jump into a higher role, which is a way that a lot of people advance their career is to leave one company and go to another.
Yeah, we talked about that extensively with Enrique.
Yeah.
He bounced around a lot early on, and we were always told, jump ship as soon as possible, because every time you get promoted.
Yeah, I mean, if that's the way you want to go about it, that totally makes sense.
We screwed up by starting at what I consider to be the best company around.
Yeah.
Because now we have nowhere better to jump.
Yeah. I'm legitimately worried about if I ever leave Insomniac, the kind of cultures that I could be going into. You know,
I'm right there with you.
Insomniac has done a great job, at least like our team specifically has done a great job of eliminating crunch and having good communication and
dude, the people who just bring in food all the time, you could be able to play board games at lunch every day. Like, there's so much to like about this place.
Plus the healthcare options are great. You know, 401k has matching.
This is not promoted by Insomniac at all, by the way.
Yes,
it's just legit.
It feels like Insomniac cares about its employees, right? And my hope is that by being a part of Sony now, that culture can permeate maybe into some of the other Sony first-party studios. You know, I don't really know what it's like there. I haven't been there, but we've all heard the stories about crunch at specific worldwide studios. Not going to mention anybody in specific, but
but it exists,
and that's another thing that we're trying to do with this podcast is to bridge some of we have these silos between the studios, even under the whole Sony umbrella. And to just get artists communicating between them might start to, you know, break down some of those communication barriers and have, you know, better cultures at these studios.
And but this place is pretty awesome, and it a lot of times I've always thought about, like, I mean, this was my dream goal, and then I got it, and I was like, fuck. I mean, it's like I'm so excited to be here, but then it's like, but my brain, of course, just starts thinking like 10 years down the line, like, well, then what, you know?
Company man now.
Yeah, but you know. Yeah, this
Just
place
working
is
for
great.
that watch.
I don't know. This place is great.
It is.
It is. So, I mean, we should probably start wrapping up, getting to our work day.
Yeah.
But I think we should definitely, after, talking about Insomniac for so long, we should shout out that Insomniac just released Stormland.
Great reviews.
Great reviews. I played it at E3 in a pretty early state, and it was fantastic. I mean, like, as far as VR games go, I've never felt that level of, like, freedom of movement, and, like, you can fly around, jump around, shoot people, grab people, throw them. Like, it's crazy fun. So,
and I played super early, like when you were so buggy, your character was stuck in the ground, and I still had a blast.
Yeah.
Like the jumping into a sniper rifle and going into the scope mode. I cannot wait to get back into that.
Yeah,
it's
so
the game I'm most excited about right now.
Definitely a shout out to them and the team in North Carolina. They absolutely crushed it.
Totally.
So check that out.
It's gorgeous.
Yeah, it looks awesome.
Have you gotten to play the released version yet?
I have not. I played a very close version of the to the release in the studio, but
we've got to get it just set up here again somewhere because everybody really wants to check it out.
Yeah.
Or maybe just set it up at somebody's house and just have people pay like $5.
There you go.
I'll serve you up homemade cookies.
Yeah.
Cool, man. Was there anything else you wanted to mention, Jason? You have anything you want to promote? Any tutorials or products you got out there?
Nope, I ain't got nothing. If y'all want to tweet at me stuff that you would like to see in a tutorial or a tutorial series at Jayson Fitch on Twitter, let me know. I've thought about diving into some hard surface stuff. I've thought about just going into just talking about what the industry's like, because there are a lot of students that don't seem to really get that piece. I remember talking to some kids that really wanted to be generalists in the game industry, and I was just like, man,
does that exist?
You can do that at an indie studio for sure, but like they were talking to AAA studios like, hey, I want to be a generalist. Like, yeah, what you really probably want is to be a visual effects artist.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, maybe they can be like an outsourcing collaborator now.
Could be.
Yeah,
Bring
maybe.
stuff in. But, you did mention the hard surface tutorials, and you did have a really fantastic piece from the ZBrush Summit last year, which we'll stick in there too.
Oh, sure, yeah. Grain of salt, y'all. That works very specifically with like organic types of armor.
Yes.
I wouldn't say use that step for everything. I've recently reworked my pipeline again to be mostly Maya, so
that folks, it's always changing.
Yeah.
But if you want to put a face to the voice, you can see Jason's pretty face on YouTube over there. So we'll definitely post it up.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, I think that's all we had. And again, my sincerest apologies for the forever Lost to the Void podcast.
Tiny violin.
Rest in peace.
Yep.
Boys, this was really fun.
Yes, it was.
Can't wait to do it again.
Yeah, thanks for having me, guys.
Thanks for coming on. All
Peace.
Right.
Yes, it is true. I lost the entire first half of this podcast. I am so sorry to Jayson and Damon and all of you who will never get to hear his glorious information. Fortunately, Jayson already had signed on to do a second half because our first part got cut short. So we were really lucky to have him back in and doing a second half today. Now, you can check out all the show notes that have everything we talked about. And I would also say to keep an eye out for Black Friday and Cyber Monday deals. We've seen everything from Marvelous Designer on sale to rendering software. And additionally, there's a prequel episode that Damon and I recorded before we started doing any of these episodes, where we talked about making our leap from being students to working at Insomniac. And I started about almost a year and a half ago, and Damon officially just started about a month ago. So both made this transition very recently, and if you'd like to hear more about that, let us know, and we'll release that episode too. So Until next time, art friends, have a great week.